Hi, everybody. So, we're going to read Chapter 2, Genetic Engineering. It's kind of an interesting, well, it's actually a really interesting um, chapter, but we're going to have to work together about how we record it because it's sort of about a culture, but not really about a specific one, a certain area, actually in Mesoamerica. And a lot of it's going to be about corn, and just check out all those varieties. It's pretty amazing. That's not all of the varieties of corn in the world at all. That's just some of them. Some are big, some are small, blue, mixed. Oh, pardon me, it's getting late. Okay, Chapter 2, Genetic Engineering. If you ask modern scientists to name the world's greatest achievements in genetic engineering, you might be surprised by one of their low-tech answers: maize. Scientists know that maize, called corn in the United States, was created more than 6,000 years ago, although exactly how this well known plant was invented is still a mystery. They do know where it was invented: in a narrow waste of southern Mexico. This jumble of mountains, beaches, wet tropical forests, and plains is the most ecologically diverse part of Mesoamerica. Today it's home to more than a dozen different Indian groups, but the human history of these hills and valleys stretches far into the past. From hunting to gathering to farming. About 11,500 years ago, a group of Paleo-Indians were living in caves in what is now the Mexican state of Puebla. These people were hunters, but they did not bring down mastodons and mammoths. Those huge species were already extinct. Instead, the hunters preyed on smaller game, such as deer and jackrabbits. Now and then they even feasted on giant turtles, which were probably a lot easier to catch than the fast-moving deer and rabbits. Over the next 2,000 years, though, some game animals grew scarce. Maybe the people of the area had been too successful at hunting. Maybe, as the climate grew slowly hotter and drier, the grasslands where the animals lived shrank, and so the animal population shrank as well. Perhaps the situation was a combination of these two reasons. Whatever the explanation, the hunters of Puebla and the neighboring state of Oaxaca turned to plants for more of their food. Their lives and their diets were shaped by the rhythm of the seasons. For most of the year, individual farmers lived by themselves, moving from place to place. Individual families lived by themselves, moving from place to place. During the winter, they hunted. In spring and fall, they gathered seeds and fruit. By summer, one of their favorite foods, cactus leaves, was plentiful enough to feed larger groups. With enough food available, 25 or 30 people might gather in a band to spend the season together. Meanwhile, the people kept learning about their environment. They discovered that the thick-leaved cactus-like agave plant could be eaten if it were first roasted over fire. They found a way to make acorns into nutritious food, grind them into powder, then soak the powder in water and let it dry. Along the way, people might have noticed that the seeds they threw into the garbage one year would sprout as new plants the next year. At some point, they started to intentionally scatter seeds so they could have food to gather during the next growing season. They were practicing agriculture. This happened in many places across southern Mexico. People began to grow food crops that were still harvested across Mesoamerica today: squash, gourds, and peppers. Then came maize. The mystery of maize. If when you think of corn you see yellow kernels, Mexican maize might surprise you. It can be red, blue, yellow, orange, black, pink, purple, creamy white, and even multicolored. People in one valley may grow cobs the size of a baby's hand, with little red kernels no bigger than the grains of rice that turn into tiny puffs when they're popped. In the next valley, maize plants produce 2-foot long cobs with big fluffy kernels that people float in their soup. Maize is a cereal, like wheat, rice, barley, and many other grains, but it looks and acts differently from the rest. Other cereals can reproduce themselves by scattering their grains. Maize kernels which are the plant seeds, are wrapped in a tough husk and don't scatter naturally. That means the maize can't reproduce on its own. It has to be planted by people. So I think it's pretty amazing, actually. One, no wild ancestor has ever been found. There's more about that on the next page. But also, corn needs humans to survive. It relies on humans to propagate. And if humans stop planting it, corn would just go away. Anyway, back to the book. Other cereals grew wild before people began to farm them. And in many places, they still grow wild today. No wild ancestor of maize has ever been found, however. So where did it come from? In the 1960s, an archaeological team combed the Tehuacan Valley in Puebla, central Mexico, for signs of early agriculture. The archaeologists sifted through 49 caves before they found anything. In the 50th site, they found ancient maize cobs no bigger than a small toe. Adorable. All in all, the team found more than 23,000 whole or broken maize cobs in the valley. These little cobs became the ammunition in a debate about the origins of maize. One side thought that maize must have come from a wild ancestor plant that is now extinct. This vanished plant interbred long ago with other wild grasses, and the result was maize. The other side of the debate claimed that maize was descended from its closest known relative, teosinte, a kind of wild mountain grass. That's a picture of it right there. The teosinte looks nothing like maize, though, and it's not a practical food source. Its hard, woody seeds are sparse. A whole ear of teosinte has less nutritional value than a single corn of maize. Plant scientists couldn't explain how teosinte may have evolved naturally into maize. But some experts think that maize came from a mutated form of teosinte. Mutations occur naturally in nature when the genetic codes of parent plants or animals get slightly scrambled in their offspring. The Indians might have noticed a mutated form of teosinte seemed a little more useful. They could have picked the stands of teosinte looking for the plants with the useful qualities, then bred them with each other, creating a new generation of plants. Experts think that skilled, determined plant breeders could have turned the right teosinte mutations into maize in just 10 years. That's amazing, to go from that to that in 10 years. Maybe teosinte is not the answer. Another idea about the origin of maize is that the Indians came across a hybrid cereal plant that had come about by some chance when two different kinds of wild grasses hybridized or crossbred. The Indians realized that they could purposely mix the two kinds of grasses by fertilizing one with the pollen from the other. In this way, they could create something new, maize. To historians, it doesn't really matter whether maize came from teosinte or came from grass. The key thing is that maize was created by the Indians in a bold act of biological manipulation. The result was a hearty, nutritious new food source that would change agriculture and society in Mesoamerica and beyond. We're going to find a lot more about corn. Here's a painting by famous muralist Diego Rivera. Okay, magical milpa. Here we're going to learn about a way of gardening. The Indians of Mesoamerica did more than invent maize. They also perfected the ideal way of growing it. They created the milpa, a system of agriculture that has been used in Mesoamerica for thousands of years. The word milpa means maize field, but its true meaning is more complex. A milpa is a field in which farmers plant many different crops at the same time. In addition to maize, a milpa often contains several kinds of beans, squash, avocados, sweet potatoes, tomatoes, chili peppers, melons, and more. In nature, wild beans can grow next to teosinte. When this happens, the beans benefit because they can use the tall teosinte stalks to climb towards the sun. The teosinte benefits because the beans' roots add nutrients to the soil. Indians either invented this arrangement on their own or adopted it after seeing it in the wild. They put corn and beans together in their milpa and added even more plants. A milpa is the beginning of a well-balanced diet. A person who ate only maize would get unhealthy because maize didn't have 2 amino acids that the human body needs. Those amino acids are found in beans, but beans lack another acid called methionine, the maize just happens to have. Together, though, the beans and the maize make a complete meal. You could live for a pretty long time on just those two foods. But after a while, your body would miss the vitamins and the healthy fats that come from other milpa crops, such as squash and avocados. So basically, corn and beans together equals love. So why no wheels? Why weren't there wheels? We have never discovered any wheels in these earlier societies, and there were no wheels when the Spaniards came. So, I mean, I guess there could be, but we just haven't discovered them except for on toys like this. When the Europeans arrived in the Americas, the Indians had no wheeled vehicles, no carts, wagons, chariots, or wheelbarrows. They did not even have wheels for grinding grain or making pottery, as some other cultures did. At several places in Mexico, though, archaeologists have found toy-sized figures, such as dogs and jaguars, with wheels. If the Mesoamericans equipped their toys or models with wheels, why didn't they make bigger wheels and use them on the wagon? Maybe they did not have livestock to pull the wagons. There were no domestic horses or cattle in the Americas until the Europeans introduced them. Maybe with animals, people in people in wet, heavy, forested and mountainous areas might not have much use for wheels because wagons could not travel easily over ground. A better reason, and this is super important to remember, that's why I've started, we're going to have to write it down, don't forget this. A better reason is simply that even complex societies do not always invent every possible kind of complex technology. The lack of particular piece of technology doesn't make a civilization inferior. Millions of Europeans, for example, plowed their fields with painfully inefficient plow for centuries after the Chinese had come up with a much better design. One's culture's achievement may be another culture's blind spot. This toy is pretty cool. Obviously, the wheels work on it. Growing different kinds of plants together is much better than growing a single crop. The milpa has often been called one of the most successful human inventions. Most successful human inventions, and not just because it's nutritious. The milpa can also let people farm the land without wearing out the soil. Today, farmers in Europe and Asia usually just plant one crop in a field. This could drain the soil of nutrients, so the farmers have to add fertilizer, which may bring new problems. The method is expensive, and fertilizer that runs off fields in rainwater may end up in streams, rivers, or the oceans, where it causes an excessive growth of tiny plants known as algae and unbalancing the ecosystem. Most crops drain the soil of nitrogen, which must then be replaced with fertilizer. The milpa's beans, however, put nitrogen into the soil. In addition, by growing multiple crops at the same time, milpa farmers imitate the variety found in natural ecosystems. Growing different kinds of plants together is, from an environmental point of view, often much better than growing a single crop. It protects the soil from erosion and nourishes helpful bacteria and other microorganisms in the soil. The milpa is the only known system of farming that has kept some fields productive for more than 4,000 years of constant use. By studying the traditional milpa farming, agricultural scientists may learn techniques that will help modern industrial farmers preserve the health of their soils. That's pretty amazing. Also shows, I just wrote lasting here, but also shows their lasting contributions to the world. Because right now we're still studying it, right? So we think it's pretty important. Landscapes of food. Before people in the ancient Middle East, that's where Sumer is, in the ancient Middle East began to farm wheat, they gathered grain from wild wheat. Cereal grasses grew naturally across large stretches of the land. People knew what it was like to stand in a field of wheat stretching to the horizon. However, people in Mesoamerica had never encountered fields of wild grain, though. When the Mesoamericans invented maize, they also invented the grain field for themselves. This landscape of food was completely new to the Americas. This may be why maize played such an important role in many Native American religions. It was not something the Indians took for granted. We'll find out so much more about this in our next book. It comes up all the way up in the modern world. Maize around the world. Maize, this is really more about like what happened after Columbus, but it's still in the book and interesting. Maize, the product of Native American genetic engineering, was carried to other parts of the world by Europeans after the 15th century. Maize quickly became an important food in places where nothing like it had ever been before. People in many parts of Europe adopted maize as a staple grain. Unfortunately, they didn't know how to combine maize and beans in a nutritionally complete diet, as Mesoamericans did. Europeans in some regions ate so much maize that they suffered from pellagra. The disease is caused by lack of niacin, B3. Maize has niacin, but it's bound up in compounds that the body can't digest unless it's been treated with a type of chemical called alkali, also called lime. When Mesoamericans make tortillas, they soak the maize in lime, which makes the niacin in the maize usable by the body. Europeans, however, did not know how to make tortillas. In Africa, maize became a part of the complex. In Africa, maize became part of a complex web of interconnections. Europeans introduced American maize to Africa, and by the end of the 16th century, Africans were raising maize as well as other American foods, including peanuts and manioc. These new crops boosted Africa's food production, leading to a population boom just at the time that Europeans were taking millions of Africans as slaves to their mines and plantations in the Americas. In this way, the foundation of the Mesoamerican cultivation may have also fed the terrible slave trade. We'll learn more about that next semester. Maize and milpa slowly spread beyond the birthplace of Mesoamerica. To the south, maize traveled all the way to Peru and Chile in South America. People of the Andean lands developed their own agriculture based on potatoes, but still they prized maize as a luxury item. Maize didn't seem to catch on in the Amazon basin, though research thinks that the manioc, or cassava, as sometimes called, was already a food staple there. Maize traveled north too. By the time the Pilgrims had reached New England, the 17th century, the coast was lined with fields of mixed maize, beans, and squash. In some places, the fields stretched for miles inland from the coast. So that's just what this is about. Is basically the maize spread from the small area in Mesoamerica to almost all of the Americas, except for the Amazon basin, and it was their main food source. So when you come back to take your notes, remember, like, where's this going to go in your note catcher? My guess is one or two places. Okay, where were we? Right here. First, though, maize conquered Mesoamerica. Archaeologists have found signs that people in southern Mexico were clearing large areas of land for milpa as long ago as 3000 to 1500 BC. Maize was a part of the great explosion of creativity that took place in Mesoamerica at that time. We're going to learn a lot about Mesoamerica coming up after this. Great civilizations were about to rise in Mesoamerica. Maize would feed the growing populations that built big urban centers. It would nourish workers, soldiers, and priests. In their monuments and artwork, people of these civilizations would honor maize. Stone carvings would show ears of maize springing from the skulls of gods and decorating the headdresses of kings. One civilization, the Maya, would even say that human beings were created from maize. So basically, corn spread all over the Americas. It was just so nutritious that it changed the world, and it helped civilizations grow in the Americas and actually later on in the rest of the world. But we'll find that out next book. And then you can check out this carving of the corn god with his little corn crown. Pretty cool. Alrighty, that's it.